I'm amazing. I'm so grateful. It's amazing to be here.
You want to live in the middle of Ohio and be poor? I want to live in LA and be poor. Because listen, the sun is out. It's Sunday. I got my latte. I'm about to go to the farmer's market and I might go to the beach later, bitch.
This year in 2026, big cities are out. The suburbs also are out. But you know what's in? Mid-cities. Yeah. This is pretty nice. Hey guys, what's up? It's Imurgency and welcome back to my channel. And it's no secret or surprise that the cost of living is way up. And with the cost of living and cost of pretty much everything continuing to increase, the cities that already were expensive are becoming even more so. And this has forced Gen Z into a very interesting position where we kind of got to decide whether or not we still want to be living in these expensive cities or if we want to be looking elsewhere. Like, I think we've all had a New York City or LA fantasy, but maybe now is not the time to be really going for that, because LA and New York will always be there. And I think that that's a decision that a lot of people are choosing to make right now. Or we're seeing now people either emigrate from these big cities to either move back home or just move away from the cities with these crazy rent prices in general. And I think this migration of Gen Z is so interesting. And the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I feel like we've seen this sort of thing before, but I think the drivers behind it are a little bit different and the destination that people are fleeing to is different. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, so make sure to stick around. But during the height of the pandemic, everyone, but notably Gen Z, either had to move back home with their parents or move to lower rent cities as their jobs were on pause, they were laid off, or went fully remote, or just wanted to be closer to their families. And during this time, there were more opportunities to move literally wherever you want because rent pretty much everywhere was pretty damn cheap. Like, I yearned for the days of 2020 to 2022 rent prices where like you could stay in these luxury buildings for fractions of the price. And I think coming out of that acute phase of the pandemic, things sort of shifted back. And I think the ripple effects of that migration for people can also be felt and can play a small part into this pattern that we're seeing, with the Census Bureau themselves positing that this could be a lasting effect from COVID. Fewer of the fastest growing places between 2022 and 2023 were inner suburbs than in 2019 before the pandemic, and more were on the far outskirts of metro areas, 30, 40, and even 60 miles away from the largest cities downtown. And while the Census Bureau does not define exurbs, we tend to think of them as far outer suburbs of metro areas, and they often have a mix of urban and rural character, said Luke Rogers, a demographer in the Census Bureau's population division. Exurbs have sometimes been among the most rapidly growing communities, but this appears to be even more true now than before the pandemic. And this is so interesting. At least it's interesting to me. I don't know if you get down for like population migration and stuff like that. That is kind of a niche interest. But I think it's so interesting to see this shift in where Gen Z is choosing to live and choosing to move as we're getting older and as we have more resources for ourselves. Because we were historically the generation, as most young generations do, to move to the big cities, to move to these highly populated areas. And we've seen this reflected so much in content over the years. Like, a lot of us grew up idolizing cities like LA because the millennials were on YouTube and Vine making vlogs idealizing that city, making LA seem like this is the spot, this is the city that you need to move to make your dreams happen. You can go to Lemonade and get your fun drink, then go to Earth Cafe and see Kylie Jenner, walk up and down Melrose and see Justin Bieber, and then go over to Delilah to see Tana Mojo make it out with Drake. Like, that was the fantasy of the time when we were growing up. And then when we were a little bit older, there was this big New York push, like especially coming right out of the lockdown stage of the pandemic. Like, New York content and New York influencers were being pushed so hard. It felt like everyone and their mom was moving to New York, and kind of still feels that way. I mean, up until very recently, where now it just seems like Gen Z is getting sick of this. And while the grind to stay in larger cities is real, many are taking that step to dip out into mid-tier cities. Like, come on, like, does this not seem tea? And don't you lie to me, because everyone has a friend who's in New York City that's actively leaving New York City. I just know it. And they're probably going to one of these mid-tier cities. And let me be clear, mid-tier is not a diss. So for all the baddies turning it up in Denver or Philly, like, do not be mad at me. Like, we need to actually define what these city tiers are, because I'm not making it up. Because first we got the top tier or tier 1 cities. And these are the cities like New York, LA, San Francisco, Miami, Chicago, what have you. These are cities that have high populations, cities of high economic growth, input and output, and are usually seen in the zeitgeist as like these cultural hubs, and are also usually densely populated. Like, these are usually the cities that like someone who is not from America can immediately name off the top of their head. Like, when we say big cities, we mean like big cities. And these big cities also tend to be some of the most expensive to live in. Then we have the mid-tier or tier 2 city, which is what we're focusing on here. These are like the Raleighs, the Charlottes, the Houston, Austin, Denver, Nashville, DC, Philly. And again, it's no shade. Like, these cities aren't being called mid because they're mid, but because they're middle tier. They're generally less densely populated, more affordable in comparison to the big cities, because let's be real, what's actually affordable nowadays? And these cities typically have these forms of emerging industries and clusters out there. Think of like tech, biotech, finance, even things like budding entertainment and production, like Mr. Beast's production company, which is in North Carolina. These cities are typically seen as and talked about as like up and coming and as like a best kept secret, and oftentimes has the feel of a big city without the congestion and the hustle and bustle and the anxiety that comes with those, so to speak. And then of course we have the tier 3 cities, or like the small cities. This video is not about y'all. Shout out to y'all. Lots of love to y'all. I hear you. I see you, but not right now. But the question here is, are people, namely Gen Z, getting tired of the oversaturation of these top tier cities? Because there is definitely a pipeline of like moving into a city when you're young, hustling, then growing out of it, and then moving to the burbs to settle down with a family. Like this in and of itself is not a new concept, but it seems that increasingly younger people are moving out of the big city before the seemingly traditional exodus, namely without a partner, family, kids, or anything to really domesticate you out of the city. What the main reason that people are fleeing the cities now is because of things like the cost of living and housing increasingly not matching salary or minimum wage. And not saying that the people before us weren't struggling either, but we cannot deny that inflation, the housing market, the job market are all exceedingly worse than they were then. And I'll be honest and take it a step further. A good percentage of Gen Z doesn't even want to be in America to begin with. So for the ones that are planning on staying, I can see why we're moving different. And I think this exodus is so interesting because in comparison to previous generations where it was for things like family, security, and stability, we're not moving to bump. We're not moving to some random suburb or like some no-name small town, because that's not where we are. That's not what we're looking for. We still want to have that sort of city-like feel and a younger energy to a city. We just don't want the crazy prices in lifestyle. And that's why we're seeing young people move from cities, not to suburbs, but to these mid-tier cities, or exurbs as some of them call, as the census calls them. And in addition to the younger feel of these sorts of cities, another thing that mid-tier cities have going on is the fact that industry clusters are moving there, because there's a lot of opportunity seemingly in these mid-tier cities. So you're seeing things like more work opportunities out there, or even an increase of remote jobs that allow you to live somewhere more comfortably and more affordably while still having a big city job without paying those big city prices. And it doesn't help these tier 1 cities cases that a lot of the things that they are known for and the main pull of these cities are moving out of the city as well. Like just a few years ago, a lot of film production moved from Hollywood to places like Atlanta, Austin, New Jersey, and North Carolina. It also is spreading outside of the country to our kinder brethren over in Canada and abroad. You have the coveted tech giant of Silicon Valley in Northern California, still by far having the most tech jobs, but seeing through multiple rounds of layoffs and just industry shifts that there is a rapid increase in tech jobs in cities and states like Utah, Illinois, and South Carolina, with lower cost of life being cited as a reason. And then if you want to get into the social aspect of it all, the social scene is fleeing the traditional tier 1 social cities as well. When you hear spring break, what city do you normally think of? Miami, right? Well, I mean, except if you were online this past year, where the city that defined spring break, the college kids' craziness, was Houston? 2026 marked the first year that Houston broke in as a top spring break destination and really truly came after their tier 1 sister Miami's bag. Like just look up Houston spring break on TikTok and you'll see that the girlies were turning up Houston in ways that they never turned up Miami. For better, well, no, just for worse. And then in the fashion world, New York is usually hailed as like the crown of fashion in the country. But New York Fashion Week saw less traction than cities abroad due to designers choosing to show in European cities as opposed to showing in New York, continuing to stir the panic that's been in headlines since 2024, with that being that fashion is on a dangerous decline in New York. So we're even seeing that all of what these tier 1 cities were once known for and the reason why people will move there are now being outsourced or just moved to tier 2 cities, if not other countries entirely. And not that I'm necessarily fearful for these cities, because this happens pretty much cyclically in maybe 5 to 10 years. The tier 1 cities will be back in their prime, at least I hope. But it is interesting to see how, where, and why the industry moves. And again, this all makes sense because like if you're open to not living in a tier 1 city, want affordable living, and are looking for opportunities in growing industries, why not move to a tier 2? And this part is pure speculation, like it's not really based in fact, but I feel like the appeal of these tier 2 cities is that it allows people to leave their other tier 2 or tier 3 cities or just general suburbs and get out of their hometown, which I feel like can be a common occurrence and feeling of like, you know, you made it when you leave your hometown kind of vibe, which is pretty much always shown in media because for some reason there always seems to be a stigma around staying in your hometown, and like branching out seems like a good thing. But as opposed to prior where tier 1 cities were coveted, going from a small suburb to one of the main metropolises metropoli? I'm gonna say metropoli because that sounds kind of. The main metropoli of the country seems really intimidating and very scary, but maybe moving to a tier 2 city doesn't seem as scary and seems more attainable. I don't know, food for thought. But moving back to people that were once in tier 1 cities moving to tier 2 cities, according to this KTLA news article, nearly 54,000 people moved out of LA County between July 1st, 2024 and July 1st, 2025. The US Census data shows that the decline is part of an ongoing trend. In 2020, LA County was estimated to have more than 10 million residents. As of 2025, the county was thought to have just under 9.7 million residents. It's unclear where the fleeing Angelinos are moving. However, the neighboring counties of Riverside and San Bernardino saw a combined increase of over 21,000 residents between 2024 and 2025. According to the US Census data, the greater Las Vegas area also saw a population boost of more than 21,000 people last year. So yeah, 2020 definitely did turn it for a lot of people. It shifted a lot of things. Like, I know I talk about it in damn near every video, but do not look at me crazy. Like, with the rise of remote jobs, maybe wanting to be closer to family, not wanting to pay insane living costs is like a real thing. Like, I see the appeal. I mean, like, not for me personally, because I love me a big city. What could I say? But I understand the thinking and I get the appeal. Like, first of all, as someone living in LA, like, having no congestion, no traffic. And let me tell you something, as an LA transplant piece, there will never be worse traffic as the 5 heading east at 3 p.m. on a weekday or the 101 at 8 a.m. And not having to deal with that sounds like a blessing. And then there's also like the affordability of it all. And while these cities still may not be as affordable as like the almost mythical, fantasized, prophesized time of like the boomers, buying or renting in a mid-level city doesn't need to cost you a limb, your dignity, and a high 4-figure, low 5-figure mortgage rate. And the cost of living for most things is generally less, or at least more reasonable. Like, I'm thinking now, I'm seeing people on TikTok complain about gas prices and being like, oh my God, my gas is like $4. And that's so high and that's so crazy, which yeah, it is. Let me be clear with that. But like, in major cities and things like LA, you got gas touching $7, $8, $9 a gallon. Yeah, I'll take $4 gas any day. And like, sure, in a mid-level city, you won't find Kaytranada DJing at any of your clubs on a random Wednesday night. I mean, maybe you will, but the chances are a little bit less likely than living in like an LA or New York. And you might not be able to find your preferred alternative milk at every store cafe. And you might not have as ready access to like the trendiest things or like the craziest, latest, most boutique niche, you don't really need them in your life, workout Pilates studios. But like, that's okay, because at least your eggs won't be $10 and the price of your studio apartments won't start with the number 3. And that's truly what matters more to most people. And as I previously mentioned, more industries are moving to these places. So there are more job opportunities without as much demand as in a big city. And by that, I mean that there aren't 1,000 people vying for the same job position. Like, it's still gonna be a lot, but maybe it'll be around like 300 or so. I don't know. So statistically, your chances are up. And then pay-wise, mid-level cities are kind of in a Goldilocks situation when it comes to geolocation pay for some jobs. Like, I know for a fact that some jobs pay you in relation to where you live. I know, especially in tech, because again, I like to talk about this any chance I get. I used to be a tech baddie before I became a full-time creator. And to my shock, they pay you differently based on where you live because the cost of living is different in different places. And yes, oftentimes tier 1 cities do get offered the higher end of those salary ranges. I don't know if that increase is ever really enough to offset the cost of living there. I mean, for some, I'm sure it does, but for the majority of people, I don't know. But if you get a slightly higher pay for being in a tier 2 city, more so than a tier 3, of course, and your cost of living is way lower, then you may have just found yourself in the pocket to pocket some more cash. Yeah. And of course, this all depends on your job and isn't guaranteed for everybody. And that's a lot of good for the mid-level cities. You can't say that I'm a hater because these are all solid options. My main cons are, of course, the resources and the appeal of the tier 1 city life. Because again, no shade. But some, not all, and I gotta say that clearly, not all, but some of these mid-tier cities feel like corporate ghost towns and kind of like the city equivalent to a back room. Like, they just feel like corporate late stage capitalism, venture capitalist final boss town, if that makes sense. Like, especially like, God forbid a tech company moves into that mid-tier city, you get that same kind of cookie cutter house or cookie cutter apartment with like the gray floors, the fluorescent light, the freaking 4-over-1 with the same kind of stores at the bottom. Like, that's spooky to me personally, but I know that's just like a me thing. Like, a house is a house. And truly, who am I to judge? Because hey, there is give and take with everything. But enough of weighing the pros and the cons. Let's actually talk about whether or not this exodus of Gen Z from big cities is a good, bad, or neutral thing. And in short, to answer this, It's all a preference. As with anything, there are pros and cons, and it's just a matter of opinion for what you want in your lifestyle. Like, yes, the internet can be a great tool to see all of these cultural hubs before taking the next step of moving, but don't let the internet be your whole guiding light and foundation. And also, don't let the internet shame you for what you want. Because like realistically, if you know in your heart of hearts that you want to get a home young, start a family, or just live in a place that's more affordable, then follow that. Don't let some random influencer on the internet shame you out of that and tell you that like you're not living your life to the fullest, because it's your life. And on the flip side, if living in a bustling city is really important to you, but you live in a small town and have everyone around you telling you to stay in that small town, that again, it's your life, and follow what you believe to be true. It's really all a matter of preference and what we prioritize in our individual lives. And none of this exists in a bubble. This is the part of the video that I was telling you all to wait for, because I think this is the really interesting bit, because this mass migration that we're seeing isn't just Gen Z moving from tier 1 cities to tier 2. It's an interesting way to see how culture historically moves throughout spaces. And there are other factors that contribute to this. Like this whole shift that we're seeing feels partially motivated by the ripple effects of gentrification. And it's kind of like a reverse white flight right now. And if you're unfamiliar with the term, white flight refers to when white people made their exodus to the suburbs from urban areas to avoid crime, which was what was said public facing, but the reality was mostly to avoid being neighborly with people of color. But for some reason, in LA at least, a lot of these white folks want to return and gentrify historically black and brown neighborhoods because it's cheaper to purchase that property. Right. Because gentrification does impact property value of a location, these folks from these neighborhoods, not just Gen Z of course, have to sometimes pick up their roots and head out. And this is a personal anecdote from my researcher, but she says that she's personally had a few family friends and neighbors who've left LA County and California as a whole because it's just gotten too expensive. And that's just one side of the issue. Then you have the other side of things where, of course, when you have a bunch of people moving out of a space that initially weren't from the space to begin with, there is a lasting impact to that. Because again, these spaces don't just cease to exist when you stop living in them. And this is the part that rings true no matter what time period it's happening in. And it's the concept of like people thinking of like the big cities as this sort of playground. I talked about this in my New York West Village Girl video, but we see so many times that like you have these people that were born and raised in like tier 1 cities, growing up and seeing the gentrification of their hometown, with hordes of transplants moving in, treating their home city as some kind of playground, like this magical, fantastical city that they like pay their youthful tenure to and then change the city around a whole bunch and then move out once they get old or serious or can't afford it anymore. Make no attempt to get to know the pre-existing communities, creating their own community events that are all behind paywalls and acting like they discovered places that have been around in the communities for years. And of course, my ask in this remains the same as it was in my previous video. And that is that if you are going to move into somewhere new that already had a pre-existing community, actually try to get to know the place and the people that live there, and don't try and transform it into your hometown or whatever projection you think the city is going to be. And venture out of the main square. Like, don't just stay in Times Square. Don't just go to the Pink Wall and go to Community Goods or anything else you saw in I Love LA and call it a day. Like, all of these places, whether they're a tier 1 or tier 2 city, are alive with people and culture. And it's time you get into it. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the cycle that we're seeing is just that. A natural cycle of ultimately going back to what you know. If you're from the suburbs or a tier 2 city, then it makes sense that you want to raise your kids there. Like, that's how you grew up and that's how you want them to grow up. And that can just be attributed to the cyclical nature of life fleeing from the city. But I think what I really want to drive home with this video is that that is not this. That's not what we're seeing right now. And what we are seeing with this mass exodus from large cities is not some kind of coming of age thing. It is more akin to a survival tactic and just further shows the state of the world for Gen Z. The money just isn't what it used to be. These cities just aren't what they used to be. And we, the people, are not living in the same world that we used to or that we were told about. So basically, making whatever decision is best for you is going to be what's best for you. And for me personally, that means continuing to be an LA piece of shit.